I have the pleasure to introduce Michael Liebreich, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of Liebreich Associates. And he's also, some of you may know, have founded the Bloomberg New Energy Finance. I know Michael is a force of nature talking about hydrogen, so I have great expectations of this keynote. Please, Michael.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Nad and the organizers for allowing me to take the stage here. That was very brave of them. Some of the words that have come up already are really key. Hubs, Eric, you mentioned hubs, and also, Christian, you talked about scale and the scale of the challenge. So I'm not just going to talk about the hydrogen ladder, which some of you will have come across. I'm going to try and put this challenge of decarbonization and the role of hydrogen into a little bit of context. We're meeting in momentous times, and it's great that there is so much momentum, such strong tailwinds behind decarbonization and behind your industry. But we also must remember there is a war in Europe, the likes of which we've not seen since the Second World War, 75 years or more. And we must bear that in mind in terms of the tone of how we talk about the challenges. This stuff is really serious. What is happening, if you remember the energy trilemma, sustainability, affordability, security. That's what energy has to deliver. And clean energy and hydrogen, along with it, was always seen historically, well, that's great for sustainability, but the economics don't work. So sustainability is a driver towards the transition, but it clearly was not enough. We are where we are with accelerating climate damages. But then about 10 years ago, wind, solar, and then batteries started to get really cheap. And economics joined sustainability. Now you've got two of the three drivers pushing towards the transition, and we saw an acceleration. And emissions largely have been capped, although they haven't started to fall. And now with the situation in Ukraine, we see without doubt what we should have known all along. We don't get security through fossil fuels, we get insecurity. And so what we're seeing is this year, this huge traumatic price spike will give way to an enormous clean energy acceleration. And that is the overall picture within which we're operating. Now, if I go back a few years, we all talked about these things called hard-to-abate sectors. Yes, it was great to have wind and solar and electric cars. They were cute and coming along well. But what were we going to do with shipping and industry and chemicals and agriculture and heat? So much heat demand in the world economy and energy access. And what we now see sitting here today is that hydrogen can play a role in at least 4 of those areas. And that's part of the excitement behind the work we do every day. And you see the policy support around the world. I don't know how many countries now have hydrogen strategies, but you see there most of them, most of the developed world, hydrogen strategies, and huge amounts of money being dedicated. 430 billion euros. The recent Inflation Reduction Act, we don't even know how many billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions it could be, because it's uncapped. But we do know that at $3 per kilo of green hydrogen, there's going to be a lot of green hydrogen and a lot of money flowing out of the state's coffers to support it. I've lived through, I think, 5 bubbles in my professional career. And I'm afraid to say, I start to recognize the pattern. This is Olaf Scholz, German Chancellor. Instead of the gas currently used for industry, heating, and fuels, we will ensure hydrogen can be used, the gas of the future. And we will create a huge boom. I didn't think we were allowed to use words like huge boom at a hydrogen conference. You know, in the UK, we have the new Secretary of Energy, or Secretary at BEIS, Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy. I think hydrogen is ultimately the silver bullet. You could hardly get more hyperbolic in these politicians' views. And that is really the background behind what I tried to do with the hydrogen ladder. Because this view that hydrogen is the silver bullet, hydrogen is the Swiss Army knife, this is a dangerous view. This leads us into bubbles. Now, the Swiss Army knife, actually I was very proud because Bill Gates said, some people call it a Swiss Army knife, and I'm like, yep, that would be me. But the analogy is a little bit too good. Because you can cut your hair with a Swiss Army knife. And you can prune your trees with a Swiss Army knife. And you can replace a tire on your great Dutch bicycle with a Swiss Army knife, but you don't. And the reason you don't is that there's always something cheaper, safer, easier to use. And what you actually use a Swiss Army knife for is the stuff that nothing else can do. In my case, opening a bottle of wine on a camping trip. Now, I do not want to give the impression that I hate hydrogen. I get asked, Michael, why do you hate hydrogen? Let me tell you, I feel no hatred towards any element on the periodic table. Let's be completely clear. And the hydrogen, I am delighted, I am thrilled. Look how many people here. By the way, too many men, not diverse enough. We all need to do much, much better on that. But look how many people here, serious people. There's money in the room. There's engineers in the room. It's tremendous. And there are reasons for optimism, great reasons for optimism. Here you can see the experience curve will do for hydrogen, green hydrogen, what it did for solar, what it did for wind, and what it is doing for batteries. We're going to get cheap green hydrogen, eventually perhaps even cheaper than grey, unabated hydrogen from natural gas. But you know, this is the sort of idealistic vision of hydrogen. We've got all these colors, all these different ways of making clean hydrogen. It's marvelous, it's fantastic. This is the sort of Teletubbies view of the hydrogen future. Sadly, we live in the hydrogen present, which looks like that. Mostly grey from gas. Next biggest is black from coal. And after that, a teeny bit of green. And the grey hydrogen and the black hydrogen is growing. You haven't even managed to do what renewables and energy efficiency and natural gas have done to emissions from the rest of the energy system. Capped them, made them actually reach a plateau. Grey hydrogen, black hydrogen, still growing. 94 million tons a year of the bad stuff. 6% of natural gas used to make hydrogen, 2% of coal, 830 megatons of emissions, 2.3% of global emissions from the energy system. Before we position hydrogen as the solution for climate change, we first have to deal with hydrogen as a problem in climate change. And also behind the ladder is this thinking. Just because you can do something with the hydrogen Swiss Army knife, it doesn't mean you will, because you're in competition, not just with diesel, petrol, coal, gas, you're also in competition with other clean technologies. We will do as an economy whatever is cheapest and most convenient, and hopefully also clean. But just because we can do something that's elegant, that doesn't mean, and that engineers like to work on, that's not enough. So we've got batteries, costs we all know, down 82% in 10 years, but also energy density up 80%. And the degradation rate, the cycles, the lifetime has improved also. Degradation rate has halved. You are in competition with electrification of everything. And that's the background to the ladder. Up at the top, row A, the 94 megatons of bad stuff. Then you've got rungs where hydrogen is a good solution, pardon me, and possibly the only solution, but in competition very often with bio-based solutions. Thank you, Eric. I was out drinking, partying, and shouting at people too late last night about hydrogen. But down at the bottom, D, E, F, G, you're in competition with electrification. So up there, things we have to do with clean hydrogen, some things we might do with hydrogen, and then all the stuff that we read about in the mainstream papers. All of the stuff where the politicians get their hard hats on and their high-vis, and they go out, and that is what we read about. Now let's start. We'll dive in, look at some of these sectors. We'll start with fuel cell cars. That's a fuel cell car, and that's a battery car. Any engineers in the audience? Hands up, engineers. Which one's easier to make? Which one's easier to maintain? Which one's going to be cheaper? And then, of course, you've got the cycle inefficiency of going electricity to electricity versus electricity to drive and see your grandmother. So when we see battery electric vehicles taking off and drawn to scale fuel cell vehicles that have been around just as long in the market, this is because the fuel cell vehicles are worse vehicles. Buses are going to go the same way. Montpellier gives us an example. I know there are examples of people very happy with their hydrogen buses. I was on the board of Transport for London. I couldn't get the management team to tell me how much they cost to maintain. Trains. Yes, you can do a hydrogen local train, but why would you? It's called battery on a train. So simple. Trucks. People say, that'll never work for heavy vehicles. Do you know what? Take a 40-ton truck, take out the engine, take out the gearbox, take out the differential, take out the fuel tank, take out the exhaust system, take out the vibration management stuff, put in some heavy batteries, and you end up with a slightly heavier vehicle. And all you have to do, particularly in Europe, is drive for 4.5 hours, and you have to stop, according to the European Working Hours Directive, for long enough to recharge your battery. Forklift trucks, right? This is the big success story, forklift trucks. Shall we do it? Shall we see how hydrogen forklift trucks compare? They've been on the market now for 12, 13 years. Invisible compared to electric. Now, it doesn't mean that there'll be no solution. If you go back to the ladder, you'll find that this, my friend Anthony Bamford, where there are no plugs, hydrogen is a contender. Forests, construction sites, road grading, and so on. Maybe we'll do that with biofuels. It'd be pretty simple, frankly. But maybe we'll do it with hydrogen. heating. Hydrogen boilers being promoted heavily in the UK. Promoted heavily. Right? They don't want to talk about the cost and the difficulty of switching 5,000 homes in 5 days, every single appliance, checking the pipes, etc., swapping out all the meters. They don't want to talk about that and how much that would cost. What they want to talk about is, they call it, keep the boiler, change the gas. Hey, that's a slogan we can get behind, right? But of course, heat pumps, 6 times less electricity needed if you're talking green hydrogen versus a heat pump. Yeah, we can do this. There are no hydrogen boilers. Now, shipping, that's LNG, right? We had Chancellor Scholz went over to Canada and he said, we're going to import hydrogen from Canada. He didn't say we're going to import ammonia. He said we're going to import hydrogen. So we're going to import hydrogen. And that's an LNG carrier, QMax, right? And you can see there the amount of energy that it carries. And this is the first ship for shipping hydrogen, and it carries 0.2% as much. Okay, it's a trial. We could end up with one of those. That's a concept. The problem is, whilst hydrogen is energy dense gravimetrically, volumetrically, it isn't. This is like shipping expanded polystyrene. It's not going to happen. I'm sitting here in Rotterdam. I'm so sorry. You're not going to be importing hydrogen. Now, you might import ammonia, green ammonia. You almost certainly will, but it will be used in the chemicals industry. If you think any business, any value chain that goes electricity to hydrogen, to ammonia, to liquefying and shipping it, to expanding it, to then generating electricity with 22% cycle efficiency, and then the people using that are supposed to compete with the people using the electricity at the source country, forget it. Sadly, it means Europe is going to lose its energy-intensive industries. And we need to get to grips with that politically. Now, we could do aviation. This is a Boeing 747. 200 tons of fuel. You want to do it with hydrogen, fantastic, 73 tons of fuel, although, of course, the tanks will weigh 5, 6, 7, 10 times that. But the big problem is the swept volume. 1 million liters of hydrogen to have the same energy content. Not going to happen. I don't care what Airbus says. Liquid ammonia doesn't work. If you're going to do liquid ammonia, you might as well do wood pellets. Now, this depends on there being enough battery materials. And that's a very long presentation, and we're seeing lithium prices soaring. But we saw this in the solar space. They come back down. There is no shortage of lithium in the world. There is no shortage of copper in the world. There is no shortage of the key materials for the electrification route. And we need to talk volume here. Up at the top there, if we want to do just green, 143% of all the wind and solar installed to date would be used just to do the top row. You want to do the second row, 400% more. Just the top 2 rows, the stuff we must absolutely do, and the stuff that we probably are going to do, is 5 times all of the existing wind and solar. Before you've decarbonized existing electricity supply, and before you've done any of the other rungs of the ladder via electricity. What I'm saying here is the supply chain for renewables is not going to cope if we do anything other than the most essential. Steel, You do the German steel industry, that takes up 60% of current German wind and solar output. You just do Schiphol Airport, that would be 60% of all Dutch renewables. This is just one sector in one country. If we go to ammonia shipping, it's 300% of China's current renewables output. The numbers are staggering, scale. So where does that leave us? What it says is that hydrogen is a difficult-to-handle industrial gas. We use 94 million tons of it. It emits huge amounts of carbon, and we need to fix that. And that's going to be done in hubs. Eric, I'm nearly done, to your point, hubs. This is where we're going to be doing hydrogen. And then where are we going to get that hydrogen from? We're going to do massive green projects and blue projects. Thanks.
Michael, sadly we don't have time for Q&A, but we do have time for a gift. So, Touching a Hydrogen Future, personally signed by me as co-author and on behalf of the other 27. So, I hope at that camping, where you drink that wine and use the Swiss Army knife, you can at least use it to put wine on, and then occasionally open the chapter where there are some pros and cons of the future. Thank you. So, it's interesting. I really loved that Michael actually provided a controversial tone for everything that this Congress is trying to achieve, progress the hydrogen economy. You could look through it with kind of one pair of glasses. I'm a rosy guy, right? So I look through my rosy pair of glasses, and I saw that there is a 500% growth of renewables that you could achieve just to green up the A and B cases. If you're a banker, you would get even more excited and start calling your colleagues to come in here.